It's 1999, and the Downers Grove area branch of the American Association of University Women, AAUW, is marking its 50th birthday. Members and guests have gathered at the Downers Grove Public Library to hear the local female singing group, the Nightingales, and to have cake and punch in honor of the occasion. When was the national organization formed, and how did that come about? Any takers here?
1881 it was formed.
The national organization was formed in 1881?
Yes, it was.
Okay, does anyone have any background information to share on how that came about?
Well, it was formed because the women who were in higher education couldn't get any money. And the men had all the money, and so they formed this organization predominantly to sponsor women for doctoral programs and postdoctoral programs. And that was how the organization started, because at that time they thought that it wasn't really healthy for women to engage in higher education.
Can someone expand on that a little? Exactly how do we mean not healthy?
Well, primarily they felt that blood would go to the brain and then deprive the reproductive organs of this blood, and so stuffing too much education into your brain would harm your reproductive facilities.
Fascinating.
And that was one of the very first studies that AAUW did nationally, was to disprove that theory, and that's where one of the first grants went.
Wonderful. Our branch yearbook always includes the branch mission statement, which also reflects national goals. Would you like to share that with us?
AAUW promotes equity for all women and girls, lifelong education, and positive societal change.
Wonderful. Okay. The Downers Grove area branch's founder and first president, Lucille Bush, recently died. She was 100 years old, and she had accomplished a great many things, but we are certainly happy with the fact that she founded this branch. Can anyone tell us anything about the original founding of the branch, or something about its early years, or even the beginning of the book sale?
Well, the book sale is to celebrate its 41st year, and when they started with a card table in front of a storefront. That's right. And we have grown into a school that is, this year we've had anywhere from 35 to 40,000 books. So it has grown over the 41 years.
And the amount of money that has been earned from it has also increased every year?
Yes. Right. This year was our record sales, and we use those for local scholarships and for national scholarships.
The branch has endowed two $35,000 endowments that goes to fund projects and research any place across the nation, but our branch has been the recipient of several of those grants.
Wonderful. And we'll come back to the book sale. What about some other things concerning the early history of the branch, or some of the history through the years? I know a couple of you were reviewing some anecdotes from early times and the way women's names were put in the yearbook, for instance.
I think I probably have been here the longest, about 40 years about. And I was president some 36 years ago. We were. At that time, we were all Mrs. John or Mrs. Raymond or something. Now our names are just our first names and our last names. That was one, and I remember this was before the book sale was started, and they made money by style shows or that sort of thing. And then one of the members started this as related to AAUW, selling books. And it started off in 1967. I think we only made maybe $300, but before that we'd only made maybe $200. And it moved up from there. $600 the next year, just kept moving up. It's a great start.
Does anyone know how it came about that the names were able to be put in the yearbook without the Mrs. John or Ms. or whatever?
Yeah, I wonder
so that the members were people in their own right.
The state
The state.
initiated. I was on the board at the time, and I created a real furor because I didn't want to be known by Mrs. William D. Lomax, that I wanted to be known by my own name. And the board had a really hot meeting about that because there were married women who didn't want to give up that. But we had enough single women and enough of us that were a little more with the times that we were able to pass it. And then it was, the branches were asked to do the same thing.
Wonderful. Yeah. Are there any other things like that that you can share about the progress we've made?
Well, one thing we were talking about earlier among ourselves, those of us who've been in the branch for, say, 20, 25 years, when I was president back in the late 70s, primarily we were all young mothers. And every time we had a meeting, not the evening meeting, but any of our discussion groups, we always had a babysitter. In fact, sometimes we had to have 2 babysitters because we brought so many children to the meeting. And that was part of the appeal, is we wanted to get together and talk to people and have intellectual stimulation. We loved our children, but you know, we were spending 7 days a week with them. And AAUW offered us this opportunity to get together and talk about world issues. And I know, I asked my daughter, who was 4 when I joined, what did she remember about AAUW? What did she think Mommy was doing? And she said, well, her concept of AAUW was books. Mommy was always reading a book hurriedly because she had to discuss it or lead a discussion the next day. Or she was in Roberta's basement while I sorted books for the book sale. Or she was at the book sale watching me stack and arrange books. And she said, so she always knew it was something to do with books. And when I was president, I feel that's when we started to change. We had been primarily a group that talked about issues and read about issues and were concerned, but we didn't see ourselves doing anything, you know, about the issues. And the Equal Rights Amendment was up for ratification. And so at each meeting I spent a little bit of time working on the Equal Rights Amendment. You know, we set up a committee, we wrote letters to the legislature. We had a group that went to Springfield. I took the train on a Saturday into Chicago dressed in white and green and went to a park, and we had a rally to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. And in fact, I brought my pen. I was looking in my jewelry box, and I have this pin that says I marched for ERA in green and white, the colors. Unfortunately, we failed. It was our first effort. But we were becoming political finally and seeing ourselves as, instead of just someone who reads about it and talks about it, we started seeing ourselves as agents of change, which is a title we use still. So I see that as a big change, and that was the late 70s where we started saying, let's do something. And Charlotte now has a group where they're really bringing about change.
Charlotte, would you like to expand on that?
Well, I'm president of what is associated with AAUW Illinois, the Gender Equity Fund, but it really started in this branch. In the early 90s, one of our big issues was gender bias in the classroom. The national organization had issued a number of reports, and our branch picked up on that and had people who were interested in this gender bias in schools and how girls were treated in a different way. And we recruited a number of our branch members who started going out to do gender equity assessments in the various schools. And we set up dialogue with a number of them, and then we found, well, it wasn't enough just to assess, we needed to do some education, a little more education. So we developed some speeches, and we had a number of our branch members went out and gave speeches on gender equity issues. And then we thought, well, that's not enough, so we developed a curriculum which was piloted here in one of the schools and written by our branch members and eventually published and is still for sale. Expect Respect, a high school module on sexual harassment prevention. And eventually we then developed a middle school piece. We have a newsletter that we got a grant to promote. And we have a number of different projects culminating last summer in a statewide sister-to-sister summit for girls across Illinois to discuss issues that they found of interest. So from that seed of members in our branch being interested in gender equity issues, we have developed to a nonprofit organization that runs a number of different projects, and it started here.
Are there some other key figures in all of this work who could be mentioned? Your editor.
Well, Dr. Irene Beck of our branch was a co-author and editor of a number of those publications, and she has been working with us for a long time. Karen Kuchar was very active in our Speakers Bureau. Helen gave some talks. We've had a number of our branch members who have been very active in that. Linda Proudfoot was our circulation manager for our newsletter. I mean, we've had a number of people working for us.
Wonderful. Karen?
I think one of the things that we learned in that whole process too was how to really organize a community around an issue. We held a roundtable where we invited educators, business people, other community groups to really hear about gender equity and to ask what they had to say about it, and then made several attempts to get out to schools, sometimes meeting with not such open minds, but I think we learned a lot about how to get our message out to a whole community in that way. It was an exciting time.
In fact, we won a national prize for our project, the 2-year project that we did on educating the community on gender equity issues.
And didn't Dr. Irene Beck also recently win an award?
Irene Beck won the Agent of Change Award at our recent 75th State Convention in Oak Brook, and previous to that, Charlotte Crawford won.
Wonderful. So this branch has really accomplished quite a few very impressive things over the years and has been involved in some rather important issues. And even apart from these far-reaching, although they affect things closer to home too, there has been the ongoing work with the book sale. We talked a little bit about raising money for that and the scholarships. Would anyone like to expand on that a little bit more and the amount of work that goes into producing this book sale? Because apparently that is closely identified with the branch's identity. So people might as well get a little bit more of a behind-the-scenes glimpse as to what all is involved.
Well, the book sale takes all year long to work on. We collect books every other month. We sort books every other month. And then in June we have our sale, and it takes many hours. We do apply to the village for a grant, which we have gotten for the last 2 years to help us. And we award scholarships to local recipients who, this past year we awarded 2 of them, one part-time and one full-time student. And they are from the local area, from the 5 different towns.
It's very interesting that book sale, the first night is attended by collectors and book dealers. And I was checking out one fellow one evening, and he said he had flown in from Nebraska specifically for this sale, and he was going to take off again, but he always would come back every year because it had such a nice variety of books that he wanted to look through. And you'll find they come from, this year I signed out somebody from Ohio and somebody else from Pennsylvania. They come from all over to attend this book sale.
And it's fun that Thursday night before we open up, people literally are lined up outside waiting to get in, and when they open the doors, they rush in, and everybody knows exactly where they're going, if it's curio. Or this year, I was on duty, I couldn't believe everybody was around the World War II history table, and I'm not sure why, but they were, literally getting in each other's way, pawing through the books, looking for specific ones. It's kind of fun to watch people getting that excited about books, particularly used books.
What about the contribution this provides the community as far as recycling? Can somebody state that and talk about it? It provides a community service as far as recycling books so that they aren't wasted.
Yes, a number of people have commented that they really appreciate the fact that our book sale provides an opportunity for them to recycle their books, and they don't have to throw them away, and someone else can enjoy them as much as they did.
And of course, the new people enjoying them get to do it at a reduced rate because they are used but in good condition.
Right.
Well, that's always highly questionable. You know how we have rules about what we'll take. There are a few things we won't accept. And we really don't like books that have been in somebody's wet basement or wet garage. And we find when we're sorting them, every now and then, Down at the bottom, that's what we're getting, and on top are these nice books. And we really do want books that, that someone else can buy and read and enjoy. So
What's sold at the sale is in good shape.
Right, but we spend many hours going through those books where we're sorting them, but we're also making sure that they're not wet or mice haven't been eating them or something like that,
But the book sale is also mentioned in the flyer. Illinois has a flyer out that they put at their tourist bureaus, and we are mentioned in there.
Are we really?
Yes, we are.
Oh, we've hit the big time. Wonderful. The tourist bureau.
Well, I think the benefit more than the community, AUW, and ourselves, because when it started out, there was money to send our presidents to the convention, the national convention, and there'd never been the money to do that before. So that meant we could bring back the inspiration from those conventions to our own group, our own branch, and I think that was a plus as well.
And what about the camaraderie aspect of all those hours sorting? You're there with a team of other people. I mean, isn't this a factor here? Isn't it fun?
It is fun because as you're going through the books, you're looking at the books and you start discussing what you've
Yes.
read and who enjoyed this book and who wants to read this book, and you discuss the books as you're sorting them.
Yeah, and we've had people who have deliberately educated themselves about the curio books, the older books, so they'd know if something was more valuable. And we have people who know more about children's books, what's appropriate, what should not be put with the children's. They've taken a real interest in it. And as I mentioned before, some of our children grew up as we sorted these books because until they were in school, we were taking them with us, and they would be watching all this. I personally think my kids benefited from all this exposure. Like, books must be important. We keep getting together with all these people for all these books.
We called these curio books for rare books in many
Yeah.
cases, and those that are out of print or signed by the author or first editions. Those are the ones that are more valuable, and we've learned that as we went along.
And we do hire a person to come in and look over the books so that he can appraise them for us.
So this is really very sophisticated.
Right.
And we've had a couple of disasters. I mean, floods that flooded out our
yes.
entire
Basements.
collection of curio books, or a number of a couple of floods, I guess, because we've stored them in basements.
We used to use doors with the knobs taken off on sawhorses, and we started doing that not just for our backs so they'd be high enough, but so the water would come up to a certain height, and we wanted the books higher than the water in Roberta's
Higher than the
basement.
water, right. That happened in my basement, unfortunately.
Sherry, you mentioned that your daughter also talked about the fact that you were either sorting books or reading them.
Yes.
And what about the different book groups in our branch? It seems that we are a very well-read branch because we have several lunch and lit groups and morning book browsers and evening book browsers over the years. Can somebody talk about that?
Well, I belonged to two actually book groups this past year. One was the evening book browsers, and then we had a book borrowers where we each had our own book and we just kept on passing them around.
Oh, that sounds nice.
And then we have the lunch and literature.
Yeah.
Somebody's husband called it read and feed. And as far as I'm concerned, I read books that I'd never read unless I was in the group. But one group used to have a very formal lunch, and the other group began, and so they were less formal. And then we had the brown baggers.
Yeah.
Yes. Right, I remember hearing about the group that was very formal,
yes.
china and fine tablecloths and lovely. And
Right.
we did it not that nice. We never got to brown bagging it, but we were a little more casual. We wanted to spend more time talking than we did cooking and cleaning up.
Of course, that's what we used to do.
Yeah.
When I first joined the branch, it was a very elite group with tea and silver service and white gloves and hats
Oh, sure.
and all that. And then we've come a long ways.
Yeah.
Big changes.
Yeah.
And there were two other things I wanted to mention the association done. One is the Legal Advocacy Fund, which
I'm sorry, would you
goes
repeat
for
that,
legal.
please? The legal...
Legal Advocacy Fund,
Okay.
which helps women, mainly college, isn't it? Yeah. College women who have been discriminated against. and gives them money for legal fees. And if you go to the National Convention, some of the things you hear are just amazing. Then the other thing we do is we're very active in the legislative area. And we have quite an active lobbyist in Washington, and we also have lobbyists in Springfield.
We had, at the National Convention, we met some of the lobbyists. They lobby every Thursday on Capitol Hill, and it was very interesting. And we also, at the National Convention, lobbied this year. And our topic was Social Security and Medicare reform, because it does affect women more than men if they don't do something soon. And it was really interesting going to visit or trying to visit our representatives and our senators.
We should also point out that at some point, and it might have been during the time you were president, Sherry, that AAUW began admitting men.
Actually, I was at the National Convention where they voted it down. They thought we were going to let the men in. It was in New Mexico, and our new president had planned, her husband was there with her. She gave a very amusing acceptance speech, and she announced that she had planned, it was her husband's birthday, she was going to give him a membership in AAUW, but we canceled that. It was the next one, I think, where they let the men in, but we voted it down. We weren't ready to let them have this much fun. It's our group, you know.
But men have been admitted, and this branch has had a couple of male members
Yes.
over the years, right?
Right.
What are the membership qualifications for AAUW?
Go ahead, Karen.
Basically, it's having graduated from college with a bachelor's degree, and then an interest in equity for women and wanting to be an agent of change. So it's the degree, but also the interest as well.
And for this particular branch, this is the Downers Grove area branch, what towns are covered?
Yes, area, because I live in Lyle, so I kind of pushed that one. Let's have the area. And it's also Westmont, Woodridge,
Darien.
Darien, okay, right.
And Lyle.
In Lyle.
Yeah.
What has been most significant or meaningful for each of you as an AAUW member? Robin, as an AAUW member, is there anything in particular that has meant more to you than anything else? Your presidency, your having been president and then co-president,
Yes.
2 terms there.
Yeah, that quite a bit. And just the fact of the study groups, I think, is what really attracted me in the very beginning. And now, and then I couldn't wait till I retired so I could join one of the daytime book groups, and that has continued my interest.
Okay, would anyone else like to jump in here, or shall I just go down the line?
For me, I think it's been some of the friends I've made. I've been in the organization now 25 years, and we're growing old together. I mean, we started out talking about our babies, our children, and now they're grown up and they're married, and we're talking about our grandchildren. But some of us are still very good friends. You know, we've shared a lot through the years.
Okay, wonderful. And Lynn, you're actually not really a recent member, but you haven't belonged quite as long as others,
Right.
and yet you got very involved very soon. You are the current president.
I'm probably the person who's been in the organization the least in this group, but simply because I didn't graduate from college. It took me 11 years, but I got there until I was a little older. And I always that was my goal. As soon as I graduated, I was going to join, because I knew what the organization did, and I wanted to get involved. I recently attended the National Convention, which really get you revved up for what they stand for. And that really meant a lot to me.
Wonderful. Helen, is there any particular...
I think, again, friends. I've known Robin for years.
Right.
And then I think it kept me stimulated and interested. And she mentioned a lot of us went back to graduate school. I did that too, and went back into the work field. And then I'm retired, so now it's the investment club. Always something to learn and something to do, and I think AAUW fosters that. That you keep growing and you keep learning.
Wonderful. Karen?
Well, I joined for the interest group and then got very interested in the Gender Equity Task Force, and kind of got tapped to be president after I was a fairly recent member too. And I learned so much as president. I had been working before, but I think some of the skills I learned as president and maybe some of the talents that I didn't know I had ended me up in a different career track. So it really had a lot of significance in my life.
Charlotte.
Well, I always say I came for the babysitting and stayed for the issues. And then really, I think that's what happened. I came because I needed, as Sherry said earlier, because I needed some intellectual stimulation, and this group had babysitting. And eventually the issues got me hooked, and I've stuck with it. And I think one thing that this particular organization has done over the years is to remain flexible and to try to address the issues of the decade for the women in this community all along, and that's why we've managed to survive.
So basically, this is a designation which a branch earns by achieving excellence in 5 areas, and it was 5 out of 5, and now it's 5 out of 7.
Right.
And this branch has done that repeatedly.
Both state and
Every
national.
time there has been a star designation, we have won it.
Wonderful.
Sounds like we're very competitive.
Right, and that's both at the state and the
We've
national
had some
level.
good leadership.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday